Hi, welcome to AI for Good. My name is Juan, and I am part of the International Telecommunication Union, or the ITU, which is the United Nations agency dedicated for information and communications technology. It's my pleasure to introduce today's current episode of AI for Good Let's Talk, which is our series of fireside chats dedicated to the intersection of AI, the human experience, and our quest to build a better world. And so I'm really excited for our guest today. He's a good friend of mine called Pat Pataranutaporn, who is a researcher from the Fluid Interfaces Research Group from MIT Media Lab. His work touches on the intersection of human computing and biology, and he will be discussing with us today what it means for wearable AI to be part of our journey to become human 2.0. I just want to remind everyone that this conversation is live, so everything you're going to see here is happening right now, and we're happy to take any of your questions. My Padawan Melissa will be taking any of your questions online through our social media feeds that you're watching this on. And she'll try to make sure that these conversations are a part of our current conversation with Pat. So hi, Melissa. How's it going?
Hey.
Hey.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty great. Exhausted. It's Friday, but it is what it is. So you want to, you have anything you want to add, or?
No, that I'm really excited for this talk.
Yeah. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Pat. Hi, Pat. How's it going?
Hi, I'm doing well, and you?
Yeah, pretty tired, as I said, but everything's great. Yeah, no one sees my eye bags, right? So
No.
yeah,
Not yet.
cool. So Pat, I just want to know. I know you have a really great bio, and I don't want to butcher it. And I think you do. I was kind of curious if you just want to introduce yourself to the rest of kind of our audience right now, just to talk a bit about your journey.
Right. Yeah. So I'm Pat. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm a researcher at the MIT Media Lab Fluid Interfaces Group, which I think we're going to talk a little bit about. What does it mean? Our research lab sort of like touch on different aspects of what does it mean to be human of the future, where we think about the idea of human-computer integration. Right now, I'm a PhD student, so I just finished my master here also at the MIT Media Lab, and my thesis kind of focus on thank you on the intersection between biology and digital computation.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I know, Melissa, you had questions about kind of the group, right?
Yeah, about pretty much what all that meant. So let's start off. What is fluid interface, and how does that sort of relate to AI and human 2.0?
Right. So the term fluid interface, when people hear that, they usually think that maybe we do something with liquid or water. But the term fluid in the fluid interface actually mean the idea of fluidly integration between human and technology. We want to create an interface or technology that's seamless to the human body and the human cognition. So when the user uses this type of technology, they feel empowered rather than being kind of like overshadowed by the technology. And I think that's the spirit of the work that we do. And how it's related to AI. I mean, AI, I think right now is an explosive field. It's connected to all type of disciplines, from medicine to healthcare to environment and beyond. So when we think about designing technology that integrates a human with computing system, intelligence or AI definitely going to be the big part of that process. So many of the project, if you can show the slide, that we do sort of like touch on this aspect of, what does it mean if we have an AI as the second brain or as the second cognitive processor living with the human body. Example of the project that we have here, you can see we have project called Wearable Wisdom, where we think about the use of AI as the mentor. So AI living in the wearable device, in this case, is the glasses, can be someone that you admire, or can be someone that you get inspiration from. And this mentor can always be with you, sort of like how you have Siri or Amazon Alexa or this type of voice assistant that you can call upon. But instead of having this become assistant, the AI can also become the mentor, be the role model, provide you with inspiration and motivation to do certain tasks. We have project like Machinoia, where we think about not only having AI as a mentor, but AI as different version of yourself. In the center here, you see a project where we have two kind of screen on the shoulder of the user, these two screens show different faces that are actually generated from the user or from the person in the center. And this AI portray different version of the person. Could be the younger version, the older version, the more masculine, the more feminine, so that the user can sort of like have a more internal dialogue with him or herself. In a more kind of holistic way. And we think that the AI not only can become the mentor, but can be, different version of ourselves that inspire us to, strive to be a better person. And then finally, the project on the right here, we have a wearable reasoner, where we think about the AI as, system that can help us process information better. Now we are living in the era of fake news and, a lot of information. And sometimes, the human biological process cannot handle all of it. So we build an AI system that also live in the glasses that can listen to things that you're listening to and process and help you distinguish between things that are reasonable and things that are not reasonable. And what we found is that when the AI give the feedback to the user when they're hearing this kind of statement, people tend to make decision better by leaning more toward a more reasonable argument. Especially when the AI can explain to the user in real time why is that specific sentence or argument that they're listening to is well supported by the argument. So these are example of project that we are doing at the moment at the Fluid Interfaces group, where we explore the idea of human AI symbiosis for cognitive enhancement.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I have so many existential questions to ask. I'm prepared for this.
Yeah.
But Melissa, do you have any thoughts, or what do you think so far?
I have some thoughts.
Sure.
But I think I will, because Juan looks really excited, so I'll let him go for it first, and then I'll put my questions later.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, Pat, so I know we talked about this a bit, and what's really exciting about a lot of the work that you're doing is a lot of it touches on the face of the fact that we as a society do have a societal contract with technology. And I think we're beginning to realize the impact of technology in our lives, right? Like not just in AI, also in virtual reality. What does that mean for mixed reality experiences? What does it mean for Internet of Things? What does it mean to have an autonomous vehicle that accidentally collides with someone? And how do you deal with the processes and the systems associated with it? I'm just really curious about kind of the motivations you have for getting started and just starting around on the track to dealing with wearable AI.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of wearable AI has been around, right? We have an imagination of cyborg, which, actually a scientific term that was proposed, I think, in the 90s, where they think about the idea of using digital technology as, a new type of organ that augment the human functionality. So the idea has been around, the imagination has been around, but I think now it's possible because these, AI technology and electronics and wearable devices are getting smaller, where we can wear them comfortably in our real life. So we start to see this kind of augmentation become more plausible and become more, I guess, realistic in the real world scenario. And back to your point about the human technology complex. I mean, we think that the most primitive form of wearable is actually our clothes. Right, humans are born naked. That's how animal and other species are living in the world today. But humans invent this fabric that we wrap around our body to help us regulate temperature. So that right there is already a wearable augmentation. And now we're just adding a more complexity, adding computation, adding digital means to that form of augmentation. So I think it's part of the human evolution. It's a quest for asking, what does it mean to be a human in the world, right? And we continue to kind of push that boundary.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something really interesting there in terms of, clothes are a form of human augmentation.
Yeah.
I suppose clothes are also personalized to the human. So when you approach a project, do you look at the technology as also being personalized to that person or just humans in general?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you look at the project, you can see that, I'm the model for several of these projects. I think because I think part of it is because, when we think about creating technology, the creator is the first user of that technology, right? So we try to make sure that we're creating something that, we think is positive for the world, and is something that, we ourselves will be excited to use. But of course, we don't want to just create something just for ourselves, right? So in many of these projects, we do run user study and try to understand how this technology is perceived and can be used by other people. And that, lead to many insight from, like for example, the wearable reasoner, where we found that when the AI give explanation, that actually when the user can actually understand and take advantage of having an AI on their body. So yeah, many of these things come out of the, a longer dialogue and an experiment that we do with participants in the lab.
Cool.
Yeah, no, it's great. Sorry, Melissa, do you have a question? All right.
No, I'm looking at you because you look like you've got more burning questions.
I was like, yeah. No, I'm full of burning. Pat knows this. I'm full of burning questions. That's kind of my Tinder profile. One of the things that I'm really, oh God, don't put that on live stream. One of the things I think that's really interesting about this is kind of the idea that when you're absolutely right that these conversations about the role of technology and wearables has existed for a very long time. I mean, if you look at like the way we think about virtual reality in and of itself, like at least that goes way beyond even Ivan Sutherland, who was considered the grandfather, right, or the great grandfather, right?
Right.
And so, and in fact, if you want to make it more of a literature, if you want to look back to our literature, you can go back and say something like, harnessing technology for ourselves, and the context dependency of that could be, related to something like Frankenstein, for example, where
Right.
the moral of that story is like how we harness technology to enable life and to take control of life and have that agency. And do you think there's a certain, have you encountered any certain fear about that in the type of work that you're doing? I think wearable reasoner, for example, could be an instance where that could happen in my mind.
Right. No, I think you're absolutely right that, the moral imagination of technology is a complex thing and has, been around since the beginning, when we start to, think about the complex entanglement between human life and things that we create. Frankenstein is a perfect example, right? And I think, the question about the ethics and, what kind of consideration we need to have when we think about these technologies is absolutely a critical point, and the most important part of this kind of research. We think about these considerations, in different scale. From the personal scale, what does it mean to have this type of imagination? What does it mean to have this type of augmentation? We think about it in the, the community scale. What does it mean for people that don't adopt this technology? Does it create social inequality? And how do we mitigate that? And of course, we need to think about it in a global scale, right? Where we think about, what is the environmental impact or what is the long-term consequence of these human technology complex that gonna have for the world. So of course, these are, part of the ongoing conversation. I mean, many things are part of the ongoing conversation, but we think of this very critically. And I think one thing that I really interested in is the idea of how this project get portrayed in the media as well. Like many of the projects from the Media Lab, end up in science fiction, television, or TV series and stuff like that. So we start to see how this thing usually get sort of like extrapolated into like dystopian world or utopian world or things in between. And this thing also really inspire us to kind of think about this unintended consequence, because we plan, we think about the ethical consideration, but there are always things that we cannot anticipate. So having see this project kind of be part of the broader conversation is really interesting for us.
Yeah.
Back to your point about the wearable reasoner, I remember receiving one email from people asking, would this type of technology make people reasonable all the time, and that will make them lack of imagination or creativity? And one thing that we stand for is to create technology that the user can have the choice, when they want to be more reasonable, then maybe they can put on the device or turn it on. And when they want to, be more creative or, be in different cognitive mode, they can turn it off or, use other type of technology. So we think of this as, as a supplementation, not a replacement of the human cognitive function.
Right. That's really interesting you bring that up, because I was at the AAA symposium yesterday for the past 2 days. It's like 5 hours at night for me. And one thing that came up from a friend actually, his professor actually coined the term Lindsays Law, which apparently the law just basically states any conversation we have about AI will eventually lead us to talk about killer robots. And it's kind of true. That's kind of the moral arc of the narrative that we've created for artificial intelligence and how we use it in a lot of our systems. But if you treat humanity and our body as a complex system that we're embedding AI into, then it opens up the possibility of what that means for us directly. Like, do we eventually like embody the narrative of being a killer robot or the fear of technology for ourselves, or can we do something more with that? So. Yeah.
Right. No, I think that's a really good point. I mean, we always say that technology is a double-edged sword, right? You can use, something that you create, almost everything, to kill people, or you can use it to do something much more positive in the world. So, but of course, certain technology have more tendency toward being used for like violence reason, or some is more toward like creative application. So I think, as a technologist, and as a creator of this new technology, we think really carefully about where do we frame our technology and where is it situated in the larger context of human and ecology. Yeah.
Maybe also part of it is, I suppose. So I think a couple of quite possibly parts of it is just human behavior in general. We're always afraid of the other. And maybe part of it is because it's so new that we've yet to gain a real understanding of what it all means for us. But I also think a part of it might be a part of it is also that it is at the end of the day a part of us. So maybe there's also just maybe greater trust as well as society, and needs to grow potentially as well. Anyway, I don't know if we have our first comment on the show. I don't know if they're questions, but they're really good points, and it comes from Marissa Zelbeck. So she says, of course, human technologies are amazing, yet it's important to remember that clothing and other rudimentary technologies do not have the capability to think independently of the wearer. That's a very good point. You also said, oh, sorry, did you want to say anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. To your first point, right? I feel like we are entering this complex era where we start to see more entanglement between human and technology, and of course, you cannot tackle this by just one discipline, right? And I think that's why the media app is an interesting and amazing place for doing that, because we have people that are technologists, we have people that are humanists, psychologists, people that are creating policy, people from all walk of life, from all kind of disciplines that are coming together and work interdisciplinary to kind of think about this field in the future. So we don't just bring people like engineers to just make whatever they think is a cool thing, but we have them as part of the bigger conversation, and everyone have something to say. We all human, right? We all have things to say in this complex human technology relationship. And I think back to the question about the clothes, I think it's really interesting. I mean, people will also argue that when you wear clothes, you start to think differently, because your body temperature is different. You're not naked. Clothes become part of the social construct that shape the way that we think, and shape you can argue shape human consciousness as well. So even though the clothes doesn't think for itself, it definitely have a big influence on how we think and how we perceive one another. So definitely this is at the fundamental level, we already see how even something as simple as clothes can have impact on human cognitive process.
That's really interesting, because I think in one of our previous episodes, I think we were talking about data as kind of the memory that we leave behind in our digital complex systems, or complex digital systems. And I think clothing, I always think clothing is sometimes a self-expression of who we are, but it also allows us to be influenced by the type of clothing and what we intend to feel from that clothing, the perceptions we derive. So see how technology, and especially technology that you wear, could play a role in how we not only let others perceive us, but how we perceive ourselves, right? So
right. No, that's really cool. Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Anyway, Marissa's on a roll, and she's got a lot more really good points to share. So the next one was, There are amazing possibilities, but there must be great care that must be taken, and morals and ethics are subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is true. But I guess that also kind of comes back to the point that you made earlier about this has to be a conversation for everyone. And it's just making sure that we reach everyone to have that conversation with.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is also a work in progress as well. I mean, at the Media Lab, I think there's a tendency toward, becoming more open and more transparency, trying to make sure that every project is open source, and, that we deploy a participatory approach when we think about technology, especially people of the marginalized community, or people that are not traditionally part of the technological design process.
Yeah.
So I think this is an ongoing process we definitely need to work on to make sure that technology, and especially AI, is for all and is for good, right? So both of them together. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, Juan, did you want to?
No, please go ahead. If there's more comments, it's all prioritized.
There is. Mariska made good points. She says this is why transdisciplinary teams, not only multidisciplinary, are needed for the development. Very true. I think we did touch on that.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes we call ourselves anti-disciplinary because we don't want to just stuck in the one head. Sometimes engineers or computer scientists also want to wear the head of the ethicist, and sometimes people that make policy also want to make code themselves, right? So the identity that we identify ourselves in this in the research community sometimes is fluid, and we want to be able to think from different perspectives. So
how do you begin by doing that? So.
Yeah, I think first you surround yourself with people that think differently, right? And then you start to learn how they think, and start to kind of learn different epistemology, or learn different way of thinking. I think that's one thing that we at the Media Lab really push for. That different way of thinking definitely resolve in different perspective and different way that we approach the problem. So different epistemology and different worldview definitely make your whatever you do more holistic in terms of the way that you think about it and communicate with author. Yeah.
And I suppose it starts also a little bit with like approaching these people that think differently to you with a lot of respect, even if they might like totally right field to what you're thinking. But she said, this is what we had to consider in developing the newly launched recommended ethical standards for development related to well-being. This also requires training and relearning for technologies as not mutually exclusive from social psychology if we are intending to create regenerative solutions.
Absolutely. So, one of the sort of like description. Thank you, Marissa. This is great comments. This is perfect and on point. So one of sort of like the tagline that we have in the Fluid Interfaces group is that we want to use the insight and the knowledge that we gain from social psychology, human cognitive science, and all this to build better technology. My advisor Professor Patima has always said that the best work is not behind, it's in the future. We technologies can definitely do better. As we learn about all these things that happen in our society, we believe we are optimistic that the future technology can definitely be much more inclusive and enhance rather than replace human.
Yeah, so that's a really great segue, because I think so as a United Nations agency, one of the things we really do care about is the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm curious about your perspective about where wearable AI can take humanity to be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals.
Right. No, this is a really good question. And I think, as I said, there are different level of impact that this type of technology can have. I think on the personal level, right, if you can have a device that, remind people or ping people to actually be more reasonable in some of the argument, right, we can have maybe less climate issue based on like misinformation of what fake news that, climate change is not real. Information is out there. We just need to, somehow remind people to kind of think about it in a more systematic way. And then at the environmental level, right, not only that, this device will sort of like help people individually to think kind of in a more reasonable way or be more creative about solving the problem, but it could definitely kind of lead to a society where as Melissa said earlier, have more like trusted in the technology and have a long-term kind of healthy relationship with this type of technology, and hopefully that could lead to like a healthier society and beyond.
Yeah, that's really great. So, is there another question or?
Yes.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She is awesome. Thanks, Marissa.
Yeah.
They are considered. There are considerations and challenges that also involve governance. The cultural differences between challenges need to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, governance is a really interesting and a very important part of this. I mean, and I think it's also a very complex thing because as new technology emerge, as people using it in different ways that maybe even the creator did not intend, the governance need to evolve with the fast pace of technological development. And I feel like it's not just one way conversation where the policymaker or the people in power that are in charge of creating restriction and policy around this technology have on the technologies or on the project itself or on the company that are producing this technology. But I think it's a two-way dialogue because maybe the technologists will also have like certain concern that they foresee in the future that may not exist yet. So I feel like this is a part of the, I always say that it's part of the dialogue, but it really is. I mean, to create something that evolve and as can handle something as complex as human alone is already complex, technology alone is already complex. Put these together, right, you are creating a very complex system, and many things can go in a way that we did not expect it. So it's definitely part of the bigger dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a complex system. It's called Thanksgiving. That's how I deal with it. Hi, Mom. Yeah, it's actually, that's a really great point. And I want to go back to talk about inequalities in this context.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right in the sense that technology, the use of technology is very context dependent to where, a certain community or society is at.
Right.
Right. Like I know for me, like in Southeast Asia, I think we had this conversation. There's a very different perspective on how technology empowers people than like say somewhere like in America or in the UK. And I was just curious about your experiences too, because you do work with a lot of folks back in Thailand, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely. So I think technology inequality is real, and I mean we see it around the world. There's a famous quote by one of the futurists in the field. He said that the future is already created. It's not evenly distributed. So many technology, many solutions that we have today can solve the challenge and the problem of many regions that are still doesn't have access to this technology. So, sometimes it's not just the problem of creating the solution itself, but the distribution of that.
Yeah.
So I also work a lot with the the futuristic research cluster in Thailand, where I came from, and we think a lot about how do we create technology that can allow people to imagine things differently, but also help them address everyday issue. One example of this is during the COVID, we made a chatbot that allowed the person, the user, to be able to sort of like ask simple question and interact with the bot to get sort of like a recommendation whether they have high risk to go to have a test or not, because we don't want everyone to go to the test right, because then the hospital will be crowded. We want people at the high risk to go do that. That's the kind of general recommendation from the WHO in general as well. So yeah, and we found that this type of bot get deployed and get adopted very quickly. I think at the end we have like millions of users using the bot, and we learn a lot from that. So we see that many of the technology that we develop can be deployed and can help a lot of people, especially in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I actually really sort of two things to ask about that as well is so I'm from South Africa. I've also lived internationally, and at least in my parts of my experience, there are communities sometimes want different things, right?
Yeah.
So also we might be offering the option to use this technology, but then who are are we allowed to say what it should be used for? How do they want or see their community progressing in the future? I think is also something to consider.
Yeah. No, that this is definitely very critical. I mean, that's why we really believe that participatory design is very absolutely critical for this process, right? Because there's a human difference and across scale from the individual to societal to even different region of the world, right? So definitely these play part in the things that they would consider be useful and be appropriate, not just useful, right? Because different culture might value different things, and this detail I think really matter a lot when we come to thinking about technological solutions. I think what's really important is that we should not impose our own cultural value or the value of Western worldview, which most technology came from on all these other people that are have the same right and the same contribution to the technology creation process.
No, for sure.
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting point then. And I want to follow up on that from an AI perspective. Do you think that, I mean, chatbots, like we can deploy them, and there is controversy of whether some people consider them as AI or not, right? Like there's a whole
Yeah.
ball field day. You could have a conversation
Absolutely.
on that. And I was just curious about your perspective, whether or not we can close the gap to that technology gap in the short term, or does that require a lot of work? And from whom, actually?
Yeah, it's really it's a very interesting question. I mean, that there are different gaps, right? I was thinking when you said the word gaps, I was thinking about I'm doing project with NASA, and there's like the gap that NASA have for in order for human to go live on Mars, and
Right.
there's like hundreds of gaps that we need to be able to bridge in order to live on the other planet. Let alone, I mean, that's just for living on Mars or beyond, right? But on Earth, we have so many gaps as well. So I think some of the gaps can be closed very easily. Some of them require a long-term dialogue and conversation. And especially when you bring the idea of AI, I think one of the challenge right now that people in the field I think are facing is the idea of data set. Right, you mentioned about the idea that data set is something that humans leave behind in the digital complex world. The problem of data set today is that many times the data set that we use for creating AI are biased towards certain group of people that we design it for, or even biased after the creator of that technology or that data set. So that lead to a biased technology, right? Technology that can only perform well with the group of people that it was trained on, or with the data sources it's trained on, but not in the general context, and that lead to discrimination and social inequality as well. So even that alone, I think is an important gap that we need to close in order to move forward and make the AI really for all. And there are different way that people are proposing about doing it, which I think is exciting, but we're still far from being able to resolve this kind of issue.
Yeah.
For sure. So I have a question that I actually mentioned a little bit before, and then I will have to go over to Marissa because she's just on fire. There's a lot more to ask or say. So you mentioned having a chatbot, which was having a conversation with people about COVID. So in terms of linguistics and sort of human behavior, people tend to trust people that sound like them. So something that I notice that I do sometimes is if I'm talking to someone with a different accent to my own, I start adapting my accent to theirs without even realizing it. Something else that I do is I start using words that they might normally use in their dialogue without even realizing it. So is potentially one way, to help AI create a sort of conversation that's trustworthy is to adapt to the language of its recipient. So I don't know, that's just one interesting thought.
No, I think that's a really interesting observation, and I think AI designer are really thinking about that when they think about the voice that they use for voice interface and beyond. I think there are two levels that we can look at this. I think one is the way that the AI can look trustworthy by appealing like someone with a lot of knowledge, that appeal like someone that's like polite and like by appealing trustworthy. And the second one is that the message or the content or the algorithm itself is trustworthy. And this I think is can also be hidden under the first appearance of on the surface. right? So I think when we think about trustworthy of AI, these two parts are really important to think about. Of course, we can make AI look trustworthy and look nice and feel welcoming. But at the end, we also need to make sure that at the deeper level, the information that is gets disseminated by this technology are actually validated by the expert, or there's no dissemination of misinformation and things like that going on. So these two levels, I think, need to go together. And I think there are people are becoming more aware of this as the field of AI become more interdisciplinary. So not just about making algorithm that is like faster and work better, but also thinking about how human would interface with this. What are the social aspect, or what are the human psychology behind it? One of the former Media Lab student that I really admire, he talked about robot or AI as the actor. So the actor learn to portray the role, learn to portray different personality. So as AI in the future that can have different look and feel, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see some of
Just
that.
like clothes.
Yeah.
I just want to bring that back. Yeah, yeah.
So Marissa's got some points. She had points for a long time. I just haven't had a chance to get to them yet. So I'll try to get them all in. So she said, although often futurists are more aligned, the political and cultural landscape makes it complex. And then she goes on to saying the previous models for collectivism versus individualism are evolving as well, with the bridges created out of increased virtual communication, especially with younger generations, which make you
Yeah.
And then she goes on to saying one of the reasons we need to be asking people what keeps you up at night.
Yeah.
And also
many reasons keep me up at night.
So many. She says social science research also shows that trust can be built dependent on the needs of the audience. So, for example, crisis text hotline, which is why psychologists are important in the development.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then she says, and yes, like an actor, the bot can become a vehicle for catharsis.
True.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
Thanks, Marissa. Again.
Yeah.
No, that's a fantastic point. Thank you so much for sharing that. But yeah, it could be, it's amazing because when you think about this type of technology, there's so many things you could definitely do with it. And so and from a wearable standpoint, what if you have technology that allows you not just to feel warm, but also to be warm in areas where you need to be warm. Say you have a wound or a bruise and you need a hot compress, and to be able to identify that. Or if you feel sorrow and there's some sort of emotive recognition where a jacket can hug you because of how you feel. And there are so many different ways that we can take this technology. And so I know we're going to run out of time very soon. So I'm trying to make sure we really talk about all these cool things. And we can always talk about them later, or we can bring you
Human 2.0.
Yeah. Human 2.0 for a future conversation if we can do it. I guess the question I would have, just to kind of try to wrap this up, was really, what are the things you're excited about with the work that you're doing with Wearable AI at the MIT Media Lab, and where do you see the future of human augmentation?
Yeah, I think definitely that's a $1 billion question, right? And I think I always think about people that pioneered this field. One of my hero is Manfred Klein and Nathan Klein, who wrote the first paper coining the term cyborg. And they have a very beautiful statement. They say that becoming cyborg or becoming human technology, to have a human technology symbiosis, is to be able to to think, to feel, and to be free. I think to be free is an important part. Like we interface with technology so that our mind can free up to do much more creative things that are more human. We use technology to handle things that can be automated, things that can help us live a better life. But I feel like to be free and to have like creative expression.
Say bye, Marissa. Thank you for joining.
Bye, Melissa. To have creative freedom is really important, and we really think that if we do this type of work successfully, then human of the future will become themselves better. Will be able to be more human, and be able to get some of these tasks that are mundane taken care of by technology. So I think that's sort of like the goal, is to enhance human expression. That's the I think the most important thing of the human
No, that's
culture
great.
civilization. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we enhance human expression, we enhance humanity. And when we enhance humanity and work together, we can accelerate the sustainable development goals. I just kind of wanted to bring it back there, just because ultimately all these goals aren't just about the technology, right? It's about the human behind them. And a lot of the work that you're doing, Pat, hopefully will be a part of the journey to accelerate all of that. So, but yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, I think we're running out of time. So I just want to say thank you so much. Melissa, are there any final questions you'd like to add as well? Or
No, I think that's it for now, until Human 2.0 comes out.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to have this conversation again. We definitely we're going to have it like offline, but hopefully we can bring you back again. So thanks so much, Pat. It was really great. And we'll hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you later.
So, bye. Great. So yeah, I just want to say again, AI for Good, let's talk. We just finished our current episode. It's a series of fireside chats dedicated to discussing the intersection of humanity, AI, and our quest to build a better world and achieve the sustainable development goals. And I just want to remind you that this Let's Talk is part of an ecosystem of products and services that is provided by the AI for Good Global Summit, which is organized by the ITU and X Prize, as along with our 37 plus UN sister agencies and our co-convener, Switzerland. And I'd like to kind of leave it to Melissa to kind of discuss what's coming up next in our program to see if you're interested and you can be part of the continuing conversations to accelerate AI solutions for the SDGs. So Melissa, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Juan. And thank you again for joining this week's Let's Talk. We have a fantastic lineup of AI for Good events coming your way, starting with AI for Good, Developing World and Esports, Real Opportunity for Change, Growth and Prosperity. And for those of you who might not know, esports is a form of sport competition that uses video games. And as the population of planet Earth is nearing 8 billion people, more than 3 billion of us play esports, which opens up a discussion and opportunity for AI for Good in which we can play with. Following then, we have AI for Good Innovation Factory, the grand finale. We will present the best 4 AI for Good startups who scored the highest throughout the Innovation Factory pitching this year. The 4 finalists are being put to the test and will be reviewed by a panel of judges, including yourself. So vote for the startup that you think deserves to win 2020's Innovation Factory. Thanks very much, and back over to you, Juan.
Thanks, Melissa. So I just want to say, if you're interested in all these things, if you're interested in following up on this conversation, if you're watching it, we do have it recorded. It will be available online, not only on social media, but also on our YouTube platform at AI for Good. Feel free to search it through these links. And again, if you are interested in the AI for Good Global Summit, our summit is the leading United Nations platform to have an action-oriented, global, inclusive dialogue on AI. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you'll join us for our next AI for Good Let's Talk episode.